The smell of money isn't what people think it is. Real money doesn't smell like leather or ink. It smells like nothing at all. Just the cold, sterile air of climate control systems running 24/7 in a 38-floor tower in downtown Dallas. That's where I was sitting when everything went sideways, in my glass-walled IT security office on the 15th floor of Whitfield Capital Holdings, watching network traffic flow across my triple-monitor setup like the digital heartbeat of a $3.2 billion empire. My name is Justin Walsh. I'm 48 years old, and on the company org chart, I'm listed as Senior Director of Information Security. To Wesley Whitfield, the guy who built this investment firm from nothing, I'm the guy who keeps his billions safe from hackers, foreign governments, and most importantly, his own family's bad judgment. I took a sip of my black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just like they served it in the Navy, and checked the morning reports. It was 9:20 a.m., markets were humming, data streams were green. For exactly 45 seconds, everything was perfect. Then my office door practically exploded off its hinges. Bryce Whitfield didn't walk into rooms, he invaded them. At 27, he was what happens when you pour a trust fund into a $3,000 suit that's too tight in all the wrong places. He had his father's jaw, but none of his father's discipline. He blew past my assistant like she was furniture, his voice booming loud enough to violate at least 3 HR policies. "Walsh, where are you? I need this handled yesterday." I didn't turn around immediately. I finished typing a command that re-encrypted our daily backup protocols. Only then did I swivel my chair around, putting on what I call my corporate poker face. "Morning, Bryce," I said, keeping my voice level. "What can I do for you?" He slammed a platinum MacBook onto my desk, nearly taking out my coffee mug. "This piece of junk is dead. Total brick. I'm trying to pull up the crypto venture projections for the board meeting, and it's giving me nothing but spinning wheels. Fix it." Notice he didn't ask. He ordered. That was Bryce's default setting, treating everyone like a vending machine. "Insert demand, receive compliance. Did you submit a ticket through the system?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Ticket? I don't have time for bureaucratic nonsense, Walsh. I've got partners flying in from New York in 30 minutes. Just do your tech guy thing." Tech guy. I've spent 18 years in cybersecurity here at Whitfield. 6 years before that in the Navy protecting classified systems. And to him, I was just the tech guy. I pulled the laptop toward me. The thing was burning hot. "Unlock it for me," I said. He huffed, leaning over me in a cloud of cologne that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He typed in his password, 123456 money. I made a mental note to force a company-wide password reset by noon. It was embarrassing. "While I look at this," I said, keeping my eyes on the screen, "you might want to check your email about the two-factor authentication update. We sent it out yesterday." Yeah, saw the email. "Boring stuff. Just make it work." He pulled out his phone, immediately bored, scrolling through what looked like some influencer's Instagram feed. I opened the event logs on his machine and my eyebrows went up. The spinning wheel wasn't hardware failure. It was a resource drain. The CPU was running at 100%. I dug deeper. There it was. "Bryce," I said, my tone sharpening just a notch, "have you been downloading third-party applications, specifically anything related to cryptocurrency mining?" He stiffened like I'd caught him with his hand in the cookie jar. "I'm exploring alternative revenue streams for the firm. It's research." I looked at the logs. This kid had installed a crypto mining bot on a company device connected to our secure internal network. It was like lighting a match in a room full of dynamite. He wasn't just slowing down his laptop, he was creating a backdoor that any decent hacker could drive a truck through. "You bypassed the admin restrictions," I said. "How?" He smirked, the kind of look that made me want to remotely wipe his digital existence. "I have a guy. Look, Walsh, skip the lecture. Just clear the cache or whatever so I can present. Dad wants me leading the tech portfolio, and I can't look like I don't know how to use a computer. Dad wants me leading the tech portfolio." Those words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Wesley Whitfield was a shark, but he was a smart shark. He wouldn't put Bryce in charge of a coffee machine, let alone the tech portfolio, unless this was some kind of test. I looked at Bryce, really looked at him. He was sweating slightly despite the AC. He wasn't just arrogant, he was desperate. He needed this presentation to work to prove he wasn't just a genetic lottery winner. I made a decision. I could report this violation to compliance right now. It would trigger an audit, Bryce would get a slap on the wrist, and nothing would change. or I could let him keep digging his own grave. "I can stabilize it for the meeting," I said, typing a command that suspended the mining process without deleting it. "But this machine is compromised, Bryce. I'll need it back tonight for a full security scrub." "Fine, whatever, just give it back." He snatched the laptop before I'd even fully withdrawn my hands. "See? Was that so hard? You tech people always make everything dramatic." He spun on his heel and marched out, presumably to go lie to a room full of investors about numbers he didn't understand. I sat in the silence he left behind, the lingering smell of his expensive cologne mixing with the sterile office air. I didn't go back to my routine maintenance. Instead, I opened a new terminal window and typed in a command to mirror his laptop's activity to a secure sandbox on my private server. He wanted to be a tech leader. He wanted to bypass my security protocols because he had a guy. "Fine, Bryce. Let's see what else you're hiding." The Whitfield Capital building at 10 p.m. was a different beast entirely. The frantic energy of trading hours had evaporated, leaving behind the low hum of servers and the blue glow of standby systems. I cracked open a fresh bottle of water and brought up the sandbox environment I'd created earlier. Bryce had returned the laptop at 5 p.m., tossing it onto my desk with a muttered, "It worked," thanks, before heading out to whatever rich kid happy hour would keep him busy until dawn. He thought the issue was resolved. He thought I'd just run a virus scan and call it a day. He was wrong. I started sifting through the logs, not looking for errors this time, but for patterns. In cybersecurity, we hunt for anomalies, spikes in data transfer, logins at weird hours, connections to unverified IP addresses. The first thing I found was VPN usage. Using a virtual private network isn't illegal. We require it for all remote work. But Bryce wasn't tunneling into our secure Dallas node. He was routing his traffic through Panama, the Seychelles, and Cyprus. "Why do you need a Panamanian IP address to check email, Bryce?" I muttered, scrolling through timestamps. I cross-referenced the timestamps with our building's physical security logs. At the exact moments his laptop was bouncing signals off servers in Panama, Bryce was physically sitting in his office on the 32nd floor. I dug deeper and pulled up the packet captures, raw data of what he was actually sending and receiving. It was encrypted, obviously, but he was sloppy. He was using consumer-grade encryption, thinking it made him invisible. It took me about 8 minutes to crack the handshake. When the data unspooled on my center monitor, I felt ice in my stomach. It wasn't just crypto mining, that was a smokescreen. Bryce was transferring files, massive PDF files containing proprietary information about the Phoenix acquisition, a deal Wesley had been negotiating in secret for 4 months. The files contained confidential valuations, unreleased environmental impact reports, and leverage points against the sellers. If this leaked, the deal would implode and Whitfield stock would hemorrhage millions in minutes. I checked the destination, an external Dropbox account, completely anonymous. My finger hovered over the phone. I should call Wesley. I should call legal. This was corporate espionage, plain and simple. But then I paused. The file transfer was dated 2 days ago, but the file size was off. I compared it to the original on our secure drive. Bryce's version was 3 MB smaller. He hadn't just sent it, he'd altered it. I opened both documents side by side. In the valuation columns, Bryce had changed key numbers. He'd inflated the projected liabilities of the acquisition target by 15%. If he leaked this doctored version, he wasn't just sabotaging the deal, he was trying to tank the price so someone could buy it cheaper. My mind raced. Was he shorting the stock, betting against his own father's company? I pulled up surveillance footage from the server room hallway, rewinding to 2 days ago. There he was, Tuesday at 8:15 p.m., walking down the corridor. He stopped near the secondary server rack and looked around, checking for cameras. He looked right at the dome camera in the ceiling, but clearly thought it was a blind spot. It wasn't. He pulled out a USB drive, a black unmarked stick, and plugged it into the maintenance port of the smart thermostat on the wall. I blinked. The thermostat. I accessed its logs immediately. Clever. Stupid, but clever. He was using the IoT network, the system that controlled lights and temperature, to bridge a connection to the guest Wi-Fi, completely bypassing our corporate firewall. He was using the building's own infrastructure to smuggle data out. "You didn't come up with this yourself, Bryce," I said quietly to my empty office. "Someone's coaching you." I sat back, blue light washing over my face. If I reported him now, He'd claim ignorance. He'd say he lost the USB or got hacked. He'd throw enough money at lawyers to muddy the waters, and Wesley might hesitate out of paternal guilt. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof of intent. I needed to catch him not just holding the smoking gun, but pulling the trigger. I closed the evidence folder and encrypted it in a hidden partition on my drive, labeling it System Diagnostics V7. Then I did something that went against every instinct I had as a security professional. I opened the firewall port he'd been using. I widened the channel. I cleared the logs on the thermostat so he wouldn't know I'd seen him. I was going to let him do it again, but this time I wouldn't just be watching. I'd be tagging every digital dollar he touched with a radioactive signature that would lead straight back to his trust fund. "Go ahead, Bryce," I whispered, turning off my monitors one by one. "Get greedy." The summons came the next morning on heavy cream cardstock with Wesley Whitfield's initials embossed at the top. No email, no calendar invite, just a handwritten note. Justin. 10:00 a.m. The War Room. The War Room was Wesley's sanctuary, a soundproofed conference room on the 35th floor with no windows and a working fireplace. It was swept for bugs weekly and was the only room in the building where Wesley conducted his most sensitive business. I arrived at 9:59 a.m. Wesley was standing by a massive oil painting of the Dallas skyline, his back to the door. He didn't turn when I entered, just gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "Coffee?" he asked. His voice was gravel and oak, worn smooth by 30 years of negotiation. "Black, thanks." He poured from a silver carafe. Wesley was 64, but he moved with the economy of a man who knew exactly how much energy every action cost. He handed me the cup and sat down, folding his hands on the mahogany desktop. No papers in front of him, never a good sign. "How's the system, Justin?" he asked. "Secure," I replied automatically. "We repelled a DDoS probe from Eastern Europe yesterday. Standard probing. Nothing penetrated." He nodded, those pale blue eyes fixed on mine like laser sights. "And internal threats?" My pulse stayed steady, but the air felt heavier. "Internal threat vectors are always the most difficult to predict. Human error remains our largest vulnerability." "Human error," he repeated, tasting the words. "Is that what we're calling it?" He knew. He didn't know specifics, didn't know about the thermostat or the Panamanian VPN, but he knew something was rotting in his kingdom. Wesley Whitfield didn't build a billion-dollar empire by being oblivious to the character of people around him, especially his own blood. "Bryce came to see me yesterday," Wesley said, leaning back. "Very enthusiastic about the tech portfolio. Used a lot of buzzwords. Synergy, blockchain integration. He wants full administrative privileges to audit the accounts personally." I kept my face perfectly still. That would be highly irregular. It violates separation of duties. No single individual should have authorization to move capital and modify the logs of those movements. "I agree," Wesley said. He picked up a pen and turned it over in his fingers. "However, Bryce feels I'm stifling his potential. He believes he's ready to hold the keys." He dropped the pen. It made a sharp crack on the wood. "Justin," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "I built this firm on trust. Not the blind kind, the verified kind. If the foundation is cracked, I need to know before I build another floor on top of it. Do you understand?" "I understand." "If I were to hypothetically grant him probationary elevated access," Wesley said, watching me closely, "would you be able to ensure any damage is contained?" This was the order. It wasn't written down, it wasn't recorded, but it was as binding as a Supreme Court ruling. He was asking me to give Bryce enough rope to hang himself while promising to catch the body before it hit the floor. "If that were to happen," I said, choosing my words with surgical precision, "I would create a mirrored environment, a simulation that looks and feels like the live ledger. He'd see real numbers, real accounts, but any transactions he initiated would be held in quarantine pending secondary authorization. He wouldn't know the difference until authorization was either granted or denied." Wesley's lips twitched. It was almost a smile. "A sandbox." "A quick sandbox," I corrected. Wesley stood up. The meeting was over. "You've always been the most valuable asset in this building, Justin. Don't let me down." "I won't, sir." Walking out of the war room with my heart hammering against my ribs, I'd just been given the green light to entrap the heir apparent. As I passed through the executive corridor, I saw Bryce laughing loudly into his phone, holding a Starbucks venti whatever. "Yeah, bro, I'm telling you, the old man is softening up," he was saying. "I'll have the liquidity by Friday. We're going to the moon." He caught my eye as I passed and winked. Smug, victorious. "Hey, tech guy," he called out, lowering his phone. "My laptop's running great. You actually did something right for once." "I aim to please, Bryce," I said, stepping into the elevator. The doors closed, cutting off his laughter. I watched the numbers climb as the elevator descended back to my floor. "You'll have liquidity by Friday," I thought. "No, Bryce. By Friday you won't even have a working ID badge." By Wednesday, the atmosphere had shifted like barometric pressure before a tornado. Bryce had been given his probationary access, which he interpreted as being crowned king of the universe. I watched him from across the executive dining room at lunch. Usually I ate at my desk, reviewing security logs while chewing a sandwich, but today I needed eyes on target. Bryce was holding court at the center table, surrounded by two junior analysts who looked like hostages, and Mason Rivera, a sycophantic external consultant. "Problem with this place," Bryce said, his voice carrying over the clink of silverware, "is it's stuck in the 90s. Dad loves his safe, slow growth. Real estate, bonds, yawn." He gestured with a forkful of seared tuna. "We need velocity. I've been looking at the internal ledgers, which, by the way, are a mess, and the capital is just sitting there sleeping. I'm going to wake it up." One of the analysts, a sharp woman named Nicole Palmer, cleared her throat. "But Bryce, liquidity ratios are set by the risk committee. We can't just move that capital without triggering regulatory flags." Bryce laughed, a dismissive bark. "Regulations are for people who ask permission, Nicole. I'm talking about restructuring. Once I finalize the new architecture on Friday, those ratios won't matter because the assets will be reclassified. I'm cleaning house." I took a sip of iced tea. He was talking about money laundering. He just didn't know the legal term for it. I glanced at my phone. My custom monitoring app showed Bryce's active session. He'd logged in 15 minutes ago from his iPad right there at the table. He wasn't just talking. He was trading under the table while he ate lunch. I watched the notifications scroll by. User B. Whitfield attempt transfer, asset ID 7841. Destination X wallet Singapore. Status pending ghost protocol. He was trying to move $125,000 in municipal bonds to a Singapore wallet. On his iPad, the screen probably said processing or success. In reality, the request was being routed directly to my digital trash can with a copy saved to the evidence folder. "You know," Bryce continued, leaning back and loosening his tie, "I might need to bring in my own people for the tech side too. No offense to the current team, but we need innovators, disruptors." He cast a glance toward my table. "We need people who understand that security shouldn't be a roadblock. Security should be an enabler. If the firewall stops me from making money, the firewall is the problem." I felt my jaw muscle jump. "The firewall stops you from going to federal prison, you idiot." Mason nodded vigorously. "Absolutely, Bryce. Frictionless capital flow. That's the future." "Exactly," Bryce beamed. "Frictionless." He stood up, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin and tossing it onto his half-eaten meal. "All right, people. I've got trades to execute. Big things coming. Try to keep up." He strutted out. The analysts exchanged terrified looks behind his back. I waited a beat, then walked over to their table. Nicole looked up, her eyes wide. "Justin," she stammered, "we didn't mean to—" "It's fine, Nicole," I said calmly. "Finish your lunch." "He's talking about reclassifying the Tier 1 assets," she whispered. "Justin, if he does that, the tax liability alone would—" "Don't worry about the assets," I interrupted softly. "Focus on your work. Let the system handle the errors." She looked confused. "The system? Just keep your head down, Nicole." I walked back to my office, my footsteps echoing on the marble. Bryce's arrogance had reached critical mass. He believed he'd successfully moved money. He believed he was immune to consequences. When I got back to my desk, I saw he'd escalated. He wasn't just moving money anymore. He was changing permissions. He was trying to revoke my administrative access. I watched the command come in. Revoke user JW admin level 9 clearance. I smiled. It was cute, like a toddler trying to lock his parents out of the house with a plastic toy key. I allowed the command to execute in the simulation. On his screen, I would appear to be locked out. Let him feel safe. Let him feel powerful. Let him think the castle was his. because when the drawbridge finally came up, he was going to find himself on the wrong side of the moat. The call came at 2:15 p.m., Thursday. Bryce's voice was smooth, lacking his usual bark. It was his, "I need a favor" voice. "Hey, Walsh, got a second? I'm hitting a snag with the legacy dashboard. Things glitching out." "I can come up," I said. I grabbed my tablet, my real weapon, and took the elevator to the 32nd floor. Bryce's office was twice the size of mine, positioned with a view of downtown Dallas, but it was chaos. Papers everywhere, not organized work but neglect incarnate. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, staring at his screen with manic intensity. "So here's the thing," he said, swiveling his chair. "I've successfully migrated the initial tranches," he hadn't. "But when I try to access the master trust vehicle, it's asking for physical key authentication." I thought I had full clearance. I stood behind him, looking at the screen. He was trying to access the Whitfield Legacy Trust, the crown jewels, the fund that held the family's voting shares and core real estate assets. This wasn't play money. This was the control mechanism for the entire empire. "That's a hard-coded security feature," I lied smoothly. "Because those assets are so old, the system requires manual override for first access. Legacy protocol from your grandfather's time." Right. He nodded impatiently. "So how do we override it? I need to verify holdings for the audit." "I can bypass it for you," I said, "but I'll need to enter my root credentials since you revoked my admin access earlier." He froze, turned to look at me, panic flickering in his eyes. What? I didn't... "It's okay, Bryce," I said, offering a tight, forgiving smile. "The system's glitchy like you said. Sometimes it drops permissions randomly. I can re-authenticate myself temporarily to help you." Relief flooded his face. He bought it. He actually bought it. "Yeah, must be a bug," he laughed nervously. "Go ahead, work your magic." I leaned over and typed in a string of code. I wasn't just unlocking the folder. I was activating a keystroke logger and screen recorder that would be admissible in federal court. I was also tagging this session with a digital watermark. "Unauthorized access attempt. Level red." "There," I said. "You're in." The screen refreshed. The list appeared. Billions in property, stock, and bonds. Bryce's eyes went wide. The look on his face was pure greed. "Okay," he muttered, practically vibrating. "Okay, thanks, Walsh. You can go now." "You sure?" I asked, stepping toward the door. "These ledgers are complex. If you enter commands in the wrong sequence, they execute instantly." "I know what I'm doing," he snapped, his mask slipping. "I went to Stanford, Walsh. I can read a balance sheet. Just leave." I walked out, closing the heavy door behind me. I didn't go to the elevator. I stood in the hallway, opened my tablet, and put on my earbuds. I listened to the sound of his typing. Click, 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 click. On my tablet screen, I watched the commands appear in real time. Command: liquidate position asset 1247 Pennsylvania Plaza. Buyer: Helix Holdings Limited. Price: 42% market value. My breath hitched. He was selling the headquarters building to himself, or to a shell company he'd set up, and he was doing it at a 58% discount. He was gutting the company. He wasn't trying to make a profit. He was trying to steal the building we were standing in. I watched him confirm the transaction. Confirm YN. He hit Y. On his screen, a green checkmark appeared. Transaction successful. On my tablet, a red banner flashed. Fraud detected. Assets frozen. Evidence logged. I took off my earbuds. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer audacity. He'd just attempted the largest corporate theft in the firm's history from his father's building, while I stood 20 feet away. "You didn't just fail the test, Bryce," I whispered. "You just signed your own resignation letter." I headed for the stairs. I needed to get to the server room physically. The final act required a hard switch that couldn't be done remotely. The basement server room was kept at a constant 60 degrees. I swiped my badge, the only badge with unrestricted access, and the biometric scanner read my retina. I sat at the main terminal, the God console. Upstairs, Bryce was probably popping champagne. In his mind, he'd just sold headquarters to his shell company for pennies and was waiting for settlement funds to hit his account. I brought up the financial gateway. There it was. Request to wire $38 million in settlement funds to routing number Cayman Islands Bank. Account holder, Helix Holdings Limited. I ran a quick trace on Helix Holdings. Registered 4 days ago. Registered agent, a P.O. box in Nevada. The same strip mall where Mason Rivera had registered his LLC. Sloppy. Incredibly sloppy. I hovered over the keyboard. This was the moment. If I blocked it now, it was just attempted error. Bryce could claim he clicked wrong buttons, was running stress tests, but if I let it hit the international wire system, that was wire fraud. Federal territory. I needed him to go one step further. I needed him to try converting it. I authorized the packet to leave our internal sandbox and hit the external gateway, but routed it into a holding loop I controlled at our partner bank. To Bryce, it would look like the money had arrived in his Cayman account. I switched to the mirror of his screen. He refreshed the Cayman bank portal, which, unknown to him, was a spoofed site I was injecting into his browser. Balance, $38,000. I saw him pump his fist via webcam feed. He picked up his phone and dialed Mason. "We're rich, baby," he shouted. It cleared. No flags. The tech guy didn't even notice. "Okay," Bryce said into the phone. "Now initiate the buy. Bitcoin, all of it. Wash it before they wake up." There it was. Intent to launder. I typed into a secure chat linked to Wesley's private tablet. I attached the audio file of him saying wash it. I attached the building sale logs. I attached the IP trace to the Cayman account. I waited. 3 dots appeared. Wesley was typing. "Do what needs to be done. Secure the assets. Terminate the threat. No emotion. No my poor son. Just business." Before confronting Bryce, I made a detour to legal on the 20th floor. If you're going to shoot the king, you don't use a bullet. You use a notarized, tripartite-approved cannonball. Stephanie Brooks, our general counsel, was waiting with a thick file folder. "Is it time?" she asked. "Clause 15C, I said. Immediate invocation. Clause 15C was buried in the family trust bylaws. In the event of screwing up royally by a beneficiary, the trustee could delegate total control to a designated technological custodian for 48 hours. That custodian was me. Stephanie opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet with Wesley's signature already at the bottom, date field blank. "He signed this 2 years ago," she said softly. "He knew this day might come." I picked up a pen and filled in the date. Once I countersigned, I was legally moving the entire Whitfield portfolio, roughly $3.2 billion in managed assets, into the Black Vault. The Black Vault wasn't physical. It was an air-gapped server farm in West Texas, disconnected from the internet, accessible only by 2 physical keys turning simultaneously. Moving money there was like taking it off the planet. I signed my name and initiated the final sequence. On my phone, a progress bar appeared. Migrating assets, 10%, 40%, 80%, 100%. Transfer complete. System locked. I didn't have to find Bryce. He found me. "Walsh!" He burst through my office door, face red with fury, holding his laptop like a weapon. "What did you do? What did you do to the network?" I sat calmly behind my desk, hands folded. "You'll have to be more specific, Bryce. I manage a very large network." He slammed the laptop down. "My accounts, they're gone. All of them." I tried to transfer the Bitcoin to cold storage and the screen went black. Now it won't turn on. Says access denied. Fix it. Access denied usually means you don't have permission, I said slowly. I have permission. I'm executive vice president. I own this place. He was shaking. I have $38 million in limbo. I stood up slowly. Actually, Bryce, you have $0. What? The $38 million you saw? That was a simulation, a mirrored interface. You've been playing a video game for the last 4 days. You're lying, he laughed, high-pitched and hysterical. You saw what I wanted you to see, I said. I intercepted your packets at router level. I redirected your VPN. I watched you sell headquarters. I watched you try to launder money through the Caymans. And I recorded every keystroke. I tapped my keyboard. The wall monitor showed video of him. Wash it before they wake up. Bryce went pale so fast he looked like he might faint. That's illegal, he stammered. You wiretapped me. I audited you, I corrected. On company equipment, company time, under explicit instruction from the trustee. My father will fire you, sue you into the ground. You're nobody. I'm the person who holds the keys, Bryce, I said, and I just changed the locks. I picked up his laptop and typed, pseudo wipe device, force. The screen died permanently. There. I fixed it. Won't give you any more trouble. You ruined me, he whispered. Why? Because you were sloppy, I said coldly. And because you called me tech guy. The tension in the room was thick. Then the door opened behind him. Wesley Whitfield stood in the doorway. Behind him were two large men in dark suits. Dad! Bryce gasped, rushing forward. She's crazy! She hacked my accounts! She's stealing the portfolio! Wesley didn't move. He looked past his son directly at me. Is it done? Wesley asked. Assets are in the black vault, I replied. Threat neutralized. Evidence sent to the board. Dad? Bryce's voice cracked. What is she talking about? Wesley studied me for a long moment, processing what had just unfolded. Finally, he looked at his son. Not angry, disappointed, which was much worse. I gave you rope, Bryce, Wesley said softly. I hoped you'd use it to climb. Instead, you tried to strangle this company. I was making us money. I was modernizing. You were stealing, Wesley said, and you were doing it badly. He nodded to security. They stepped forward, flanking Bryce. Escort him out, Wesley said. If he returns, treat it as trespassing. They dragged him out, Bryce still shouting about lawsuits and birthright as they disappeared down the hall. The noise faded, swallowed by soundproof walls. Wesley walked to my window, looked out at Dallas below. He'll be cut off, Wesley said almost to himself. Trust provides a basic stipend but no access to capital. He'll have to find a job. He has a Stanford MBA, I said dryly. I'm sure he'll find something. Wesley turned to me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You stopped a $38 million theft and secured $3.2 billion in assets in under 48 hours, he said, without disrupting a single legitimate trade. Just doing my job, sir. No, Wesley said. Your job description says senior director. This, he gestured to the black monitor, was the work of a partner. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on my desk. New credentials, he said, and a new title. Executive Vice President of Technology and Risk Operations. Board seat, significant equity stake. I looked at the box without opening it yet. Thank you, Wesley. You earned it, Justin. You're the only one who passed the test. He nodded once and walked out. I sat alone in my office as the sun set over Dallas, casting long shadows across the skyline. I picked up my cold coffee and took a sip. Tasted terrible, but I didn't care. I opened the velvet box. Inside was a heavy black key card with no name, just a gold chip and the Whitfield crest, the keys to the kingdom. I turned back to my monitors and typed one final command. System status? Green. All secure. Bryce was gone. The money was safe. And the tech guy was now the one holding the leash. I smiled and went back to work. Sometimes the best revenge isn't applause or corner offices. Sometimes it's just walking away with your dignity and a 2.5% equity stake in a $3.2 billion company.